I'm here with Sarah Lankford of Oklahoma to talk about trending topics that are affecting our nation. So thank you for being with me, Sarah Lankford.
Glad to do it.
So I understand you had 2 Intel briefings today.
Right.
And what topics were discussed?
Well, it's classified. No, we actually do very closed meetings going through a lot of different intel topics. The intelligence work is everything outside the United States. Now, it affects obviously what we're doing here, but it's what's happening with North Korea, what's happening with Syria, what's happening in major threats, drug kingpins trying to be able to move in on the country, nuclear threats from Iran or from North Korea, or what's happening with Russia. So we do a lot of worldwide look of what's going on around the world and how we need to prepare ourselves. And then there's a lot of conversation about Russia right now and what they're trying to do to us. So they're always busy days, but they're highly classified meetings actually.
Well, so what country do you think poses the greatest threat to the U.S.?
Depends on what you say when you mean threat. We face threats from things like cyber attacks. It's someone that's not shooting a gun at us. They're sneaking into our systems and our computers, taking out our infrastructure, shutting down water, banking, electricity, those kind of things. We've faced major threats from Iran, from North Korea, from China, from Russia. Those are cyber actors that are very active in trying to penetrate our systems. When you talk about a military threat, there is no nation in the world that's what's called a peer-to-peer relationship to our military. Our military is much stronger than every other military in the world, but there are lots of folks that are constantly poking at us. China or Russia being the lead 2 of those that are always trying to figure out some way to be able to get some sort of advantage. And then you deal with dangers coming from really South America and Central America and Mexico dealing with drugs. There are more people killed every day by drug lords and by people trying to move what are called narco-terrorists than there is from Islamic terrorism. So we talk a lot about ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the real threats they are to our security. A lot more people are killed by the drug lords moving in drugs in the United States. So that's a major threat to us. It's coming from Mexico, producing lots of heroin and methamphetamines especially, moving in from Mexico, and then from South America, the movement of cocaine that comes into the United States in very large quantities.
We were talking about the drugs that are coming in, and your state is near the border, and
Right.
its borders, Texas. Has drugs been a issue?
It's a very big issue. The hard part is the movement of drugs into the United States has moved all over the country. In Oklahoma, we have 3 major highways that literally crisscross the country. I-40, I-35, and Interstate 44 all intersect right in Oklahoma City. So you've got basically where drugs are moving across the country on our highway systems and being transported will come through Oklahoma. Obviously has a big effect as well when there'll be dealers and all that. There's also a lot of people that are using drugs in my state. They're caught up when they're young typically, using marijuana. They use marijuana and think it's harmless, and then from the same dealer that deals in marijuana for a while, then they'll start getting methamphetamines or cocaine or heroin, and they're hooked for life. So marijuana really has been that gateway drug and continues to be that gateway. A lot of marijuana moved in from Mexico, and for people that say it's harmless, it's not a harmless drug. It is the beginning point. And for many people, it ends up being the most destructive thing they ever chose to do, was to be able to start down that path, because it takes them down a path that continues to accelerate into their life being destroyed.
Well, of course, as you were saying, China. Do you think relations have grown stronger after President Trump met with the
President Xi.
president?
So when the President of China and President Trump met together, obviously that same weekend, there was also the chemical weapons strike in Syria. So a lot of people were focused on what was happening in Syria. The President was not only dealing with Syria, but he's dealing with relations with China and with North Korea. I do think we've had some improvement in the ongoing dialogue with China. China's not our enemy, they are our rival, but China does want to be able to move to be able to dominate the Pacific especially. And they are challenged to their neighbors. They're challenged to Taiwan. They're challenged as they're taking on new islands, we call the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea, that are not Chinese territory, that they're basically building military bases on and trying to expand into open international waters. So that's a big issue. But I do think we've had some improvement, especially on leverage with North Korea, but we've got a long way to go.
Because as you can see, China turned down North Korea's coal
Right.
and then bought from the U.S. So do you think would that be an issue on trade?
That is an issue on trade, but it's also an issue on sanctions. We're trying to get North Korea to stop trying to build nuclear weapons and to threaten all their neighbors. North Korea's been pretty irrational. So if we can, China has a lot of leverage on them because most of the trade, as you know, North Korea and China are border countries. And so for North Korea to be able to buy products and sell products, most of it goes back and forth to China. So China can just say, tell you what, we're not going to sell you things until you act better, which shut down the North Korean economy immediately. So they have a lot of leverage, and if they'll help them do the right thing, it'll help the entire region.
Well, you're saying North Korea with the nuclear weapons, we have the biggest military on Earth.
Yep, not even close.
So why should we be afraid of North Korea? If we could, if we're so much bigger, we could pretty much dominate them.
Sure, we could militarily, but no one wants to do that. You have a military, so you don't have to use it. You have the strongest person in the room, no one threatens because they're the strongest person in the room. So the challenge that we have is, there's no doubt we have the strongest military in the world, but you have a strong military to help your diplomacy because you want to do things through your State Department and through diplomatic means rather than having to use your military might. North Korea is also very irrational. They're not going to hurt the United States. They can't reach us to be able to do that. They could hurt our allies. They could hurt Japan. They could hurt South Korea. They could hurt the entire region with not only a nuclear weapon, but with what's called conventional weapons. Just launching tanks and artillery. They've got tens of thousands of pieces of artillery all pointed towards Seoul, South Korea, where millions of people could be hurt or killed in a war. So obviously no one wants that to occur. So we're trying to get North Korea to stand down.
As you were saying, the little guy doesn't threaten the big guy, but Kim Jong-un has, quote unquote, threatened us. So are you thinking those threats are, him threatening us are false?
No one really knows. He's not been a rational actor. His dad was a little more predictable. His dad, Kim Jong-il, would threaten that he's going to threaten a nuclear test or a missile test and would say, unless the international community gives me food aid and helps me feed my starving people, then I'm going to do this test. Kim Jong-un doesn't do that. He just tests all he can. This becomes a brag for him, and I think that's a real problem because no one knows how to be able to predict him. So you have to be more attentive to say, this guy may really launch something because he's not rational.
You know, on Sunday, you were interviewed by one of my colleagues, and you were saying...
Chris Wallace?
Yes.
Yes.
You were saying that you hope President Trump will release his tax returns so people can move on. What people are you referring to, and what and what do you mean by move on?
Yeah, so that's a great question. All I was saying was President Trump during the campaign said he was going to release his tax returns. I don't have an issue with when someone asks me and says, should he do it? I was like, sure he should. He said he was going to do it. He should fulfill his promise and do what he said he was going to do. I would expect any president would do that, that what he said he was going to do, he's actually going to do. Now, I don't think there's any big deal in his taxes. I don't know of any issue there. I think there are a lot of people trying to be able to attack everything that he does, and they're trying to use that. It reminds me somewhat of all the people 3 years ago that would come to my town hall meetings and say, we need to get President Obama's birth certificate. There's going to be some secret in the birth certificate. We need to get the birth certificate. Well, the birth certificate comes out, which, by the way, Donald Trump, when he was Citizen Trump, is the one that pushed President Obama to actually release his birth certificate. It comes out, and it's a non-story. I think when President Trump at some point releases his taxes, at whatever point he chooses to do that, I think it's going to be a big noise that he released it, and then it's going to be a non-story. But that's up to him to do that. I don't think we should compel him, but I think he said he was going to do it. He should follow through on his word.
So, you know, in prison right now is Pastor Brunson.
Andrew Brunson, that's right.
So, getting him out of prison, how does that work?
So the nation of Turkey in October of last year picked up Andrew Brunson and his wife, Noreen. They've been missionaries in Turkey for 23 years. They've served faithfully the Turkish people. There's been no issue. There's been no problems. But the Turkish government swept them up, was sweeping up tens of thousands of other people and just put them in jail and said, we'll charge you later. We're trying to think about whether we need to charge you, and literally just put tens of thousands of people in jail. I went and met with Turkish leaders in December and said, you have an American that you're holding. There's no charges on him. I'm trying to figure out why you've got this American. You need to release him. We've continued to be able to step up the pressure. Well, now the Vice President has met with them. Secretary of State has met with the Turkish leaders. President Trump has made statements about it. Turkey needs to release this American pastor. They still have never charged. I would not encourage any American business to do business in Turkey right now, because any American that travels to Turkey could be a threat, because clearly the Turkish government is changing dramatically from what they were. It used to be that Americans and Turks went back and forth all the time. They're a member of NATO. They were a very predictable partner, but now they're randomly grabbing Americans and imprisoning them, not filing charges on them, just holding them. So we're continuing to be able to pressure the Turkish government and to say, you should do the responsible thing, what you have always done in the past, to be able to release people that don't have charges and to be able to let them go. So we're trying to keep the pressure up on the Turkish government to do the right thing. In the meantime, I'm encouraging every American not to travel to Turkey, because we can't predict what the Turkish government's going to do with any American that travels there.
Well, in grades, in school, I get letter grades, and the first 100 days are coming to an end.
They are.
What letter grade would you give President Trump?
That's a very difficult question, because it depends on what area you're asking about. I would say it's very hard to be able to move legislation in the first 100 days. Everyone always says there should be big legislative achievements. The problem with that is the Senate can't take up a lot of legislation in the president's first 100 days, because we're doing cabinet office.